Everybody, Lady Towers here. Today we're going to learn how to make a jabbot like the one pictured here in this image. Jabbots aren't necessarily hard to make, but they are fairly complicated in some areas and come into three distinct parts. What you're going to need for this project are just a couple of things. You need a pair of scissors, you're going to need one button, whatever size, preferably something small. You're going to need some fabric, which we'll talk about in a second. You're going to need a bunch of pins. You're going to need one sewing needle. You're going to need some thread in the same size or same color as the fabric. Preferably, you can do an accent color though if you wanted. And you're going to need a tape measure. So this fabric looks really nice. It's soft, it's cottony. I prefer using thicker fabrics on jabbots because it provides more of a oomph to the ruffle. But you can use technically any type of fabric you want. You can use lace or satin. Quick, simple, easy, very cheap method for making these is bed sheets. And for the cost, for $2 or $3, it's not bad. They're nice fabric as well on top of it. And they come with little cheater areas, like these ribbed parts on the end. The hems are very nicely sewn. They're very sturdy. They like quadruple sew them, and they can be cut off fairly simple. So what I'm going to do for this tutorial is I'm going to use this bed sheet, and I'm going to talk here in a second about how to utilize the bed sheet to make the jabbot. Now, first of all first steps, what we need to do is decide how long we want the jabbot to be, and also the length of our neck. Too small or too big, because you want it to be snug, but not to the point where it's going to choke you either. So once we figure out the size of our neck, we're going to use my neck measurement for today. I usually make them for Lord Towers, and he has, I think, a 17-inch neck, whereas mine's only 15. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your fabric, and what we talked about, like the hem on the bottom of the blanket, you're going to cut that off. You're going to cut that off. Eventually what you'll do is you'll find that you have a big piece that looks kind of like this when you cut the bottom hem off. If you aren't using a blanket, if you're using standard fabric, what you can do is something I'll talk about in a second. But for this purpose, we're going to look at the hem right now. So what I did is I took a hem just like this one. I measured it out with my ruler, found 15 inches. And I always recommend, since I'm going to fix mine close with a button, add an extra inch, because you don't want to choke yourself. So I measured it out to be 16 inches, and I cut it. So this will be our neck. See, wasn't that super easy? I love hems because they're on the end of blankets, because they're kind of cheater for nice, already pre-folded and sewn and hemmed. But, so we have our 16-inch neckline. So the next thing I did is I cut out our neck ruffle piece. So in the same theory as if you aren't using a blanket for this, you can also make the neckline out of the same theory that I'm going to talk about right here. So for the neck ruffle, you're going to need to figure out how big you want the ruffle to be on the neckline, and then times that by 2. So what I do in the fabric is I kind of decide how thick I want it to be, and then I fold it in half. So once I have it folded in half, I cut up and then over, and I get the full length. And when I fold it over, that's going to be the size of my ruffle. Now you can use the same theory here, again doubling the width that you need, folding it over, and it'll cause you to have a neckband like this. You just would need to sew across the bottom to make this a cohesive neckband. So what we need to do for the length of the neck ruffle, though, is take whatever measurement you have for your neck and times it by 1.5. So if this is 16 inches, you need to times that by 1.5. So 16 plus 8 is 24. So I have a 24-inch ruffle. I always try to add an extra inch or two onto that, so I think this one's actually 26 inches that I cut. And all you gotta do lay out your measuring tape. This does not have to be square, so you can see on mine we've got little like wobbliness, not a straight line that I cut. That's totally okay, because what we're going to do is we're going to wind up folding it over and stitching it onto the back of the neckline, and all that kind of weirdness is going to go away. So we have these two pieces. The next major part that we need for our jabbot is the base. So what you're going to wind up with is a piece that looks like this. It'll have a longer part on the bottom and a shorter part at the top. So essentially what you're going to do is make a very long triangle and cut the tip off. So this will be the length of your jabbot minus about an inch, because we're going to need to sew this like this onto the neckline. Now you're looking at me and you're going, well, Ashley, this is great, but this looks nothing like a jabbot. So the last piece that you need to cut out is the jabbot ruffle, which is this piece up here. So the jabbot ruffle, again, needs to be double the length or double the width of what you want your ruffle to be. So I'm going to make a big honkin' ruffle on this one. So what you do to figure out how long you need the ruffle to be is you take your cut off triangle thingy and you take your measuring tape and you measure from here to here on the bottom, and that is 4 and almost a half inches. And you go up an inch, and that's about 3.5 inches, so 4.5 and 3.5. 8 inches, go up another inch. 3 inches, so 8 plus 3, 11 inches, go up another inch. 2.5 inches, 13.5 inches, and then another one, so 15.5 inches, and then you add an inch for every section you went up. So we went up 5 times, and we're going to add 5 inches, so that's 18.5 inches. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to cut your ribbon to be 18.5 inches, and I believe that's what I did on this one. I'll double check real quick now that I think about it. I always make it a little longer. So for this one, I actually did go to 25. So 18.5 is the bare minimum of what you need. Anything above that's going to help increase the flare of the ruffle, because you're going to need extra fabric to create that ruffle. So there are a couple of ways you can proceed from here. What you could do is you could do a slip stitch here and pull it till it automatically kind of ruffles up. I really don't like to do that. I think they're really asymmetrical in that fashion, and even though it's a ton more work, I like to pin it. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start the pinning process. All right, excuse me. So our next step, or our first step really, is one of two things. Either we can start the ruffle here, or we can start the ruffle on the neck piece. Now, as odd as this sounds, I usually do the ruffle for the actual jabbot first, even though this is the easier one, because if this gets messed up, it's harder to restart the whole process, whereas if this gets messed up, it's easy to replace. So I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. We'll talk about some theory, and then I'll show you the pinnings in kind of sections, because otherwise it takes a little bit of time, and I don't want to keep you for too long. So the first thing you do is you fold your jabbot ruffle in half, and we're going to start by making kind of a square and then going in zigzagging patterns. So what we're going to do is at the very bottom of the large part of our triangle, we're going to pin the double layer side, so that the two-piece side, to the edge. So that will look like this, if the pin will cooperate, like this. Then we're going to angle this, and this gets a little argumentative here, making sure that you're keeping the two edges together. You're going to create a ruffle, which essentially you just pinch two pieces of fabric together, and then lay them down like that. So you create your first ruffle as you start moving it inward. And you pin. Like I said, there's lots of pinning. And then you're going to create your next ruffle. If you want to in advance, you can come and sew these together to make this a little easier, but you don't necessarily have to. I created another ruffle and I'm pinning it here, and I'm going along the fat side, the bottom, the triangle piece. Another ruffle. So you're going to go along like this, essentially all the way along the bottom. All right, so as you can see, we have completely sewn, or not sewn, pinned along the bottom. And I've even started to come up on the back side a little bit right here. So here's where the fun part gets. What you're going to do is you're going to flip. So you have what I'm going to call the right side. And you're going to flip it kind of over. And you're going to start pinning slightly above where you pinned before on the opposite side. So you're going to flip it over. And you're going to come here, same side as this, but flipping it over this piece. And you're going to come in fairly close and start your ruffles again. So again, this might be a little argumentative. Our goal is to create a little bit of a box piece right here. First pin in, make another ruffle. The more ruffles you make, the more of the ruffle you'll see in the bottom of the ruffle in this part. So you want to make at least 3 ruffles, otherwise it starts to look a little plain. So at the very end here, you want it to almost but not quite touch your first pin area. All right, as we come up here, we're going to do the same thing, except, so this is what this is going to look like. So when this flips over, you start to see where the jabbot comes in. This is sewn underneath. We've created a little kind of square, and this will flip over and create the jabbot like that. So we want to do the same thing up here, but we don't have to make the complete box. So as you come up the side here, pin this right here, and go up about 1 inch. Then we're going to come up. So I have this sort of on the top side here, and I'm pinning it in that general direction. This other pin underneath here, not cooperate with it. This is where the pieces start to get a little argumentative, because you're trying to fold them in ways that they don't really want to be folded because you're forcing a crease. But that's okay, because we will get them to cooperate. Make sure the bottom triangle isn't getting crushed or tilted in any way also, because it'll make your jabbot lopsided. Pin here. Make sure my 2 pieces are together there. Then I'm going to pin here. What it'll look like when you're done pinning. If you look underneath, you can see all the pin work that I've done. I went back and fixed a couple of ruffles who were trying to escape. Don't be surprised if you have to do this for a couple times, where you go through and try it and then mix it and move it around and make sure everything's okay. But at the end, it'll look like this. So after, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and sew this on a sewing machine. You can sew this by hand if you want, just a little more time intensive. And then we'll look at what that looks like afterwards, okay? This is what it'll look like when you're done pinning. If you look underneath, you can see all the pin work that I've done. I went back and fixed a couple of ruffles who were trying to escape. Don't be surprised if you have to do this for a couple times, where you go through and try it and then mix it and move it around and make sure everything's okay. But at the end, it'll look like this. So after